What's up, everybody? I'm Erik Scramlin, and this is the Tactical In-Service Podcast, a podcast for law enforcement. I'm so excited and happy to finally be introducing my new podcast. I have been thinking about this for a long time. It's been in the works for a long time. It's just been a matter of getting it together and getting it launched. So this is an introduction that I put together for the podcast to let you know what you can expect to take from this podcast and some of the things I'm going to be talking about on here. And I'm going to try to keep this brief. So first of all, this is going to be a podcast specifically for law enforcement and public safety professionals. And I guess prosecutors too could probably take some value from this. My goal with this podcast is really going to be to provide value to the law enforcement community. I'm going to be talking a lot about New Mexico specific issues, but if you're a law enforcement officer outside of the state of New Mexico, I'm also going to be talking about Fourth Amendment issues, liability related to your work, that sort of thing. So you'll still, regardless of where you're at, be able to take a lot from this, I think. So that's kind of the idea and the goal of this podcast is I wanted to get something out there. For example, let's say a new case comes out tomorrow. I get the case, I read it, I analyze it, I break it down, and then I get on here and I tell you what that case is about. I'm going to give you a disclaimer and tell you that this is not official legal advice. I'm not your attorney. This does not create an attorney-client relationship, and you should always consult with your own attorney, your city attorneys, your county attorneys, whatever the case may be. Make sure you consult with them. But this is information coming from a former prosecutor that started a law enforcement training company, so I'm staying on top of the stuff. So the goal is, new case comes out, I break it down, I get it out to you within 48 hours. So make sure you hit the subscribe button here for the podcast, and since it's going to also go on YouTube, make sure you sign up there so you'll get notifications as soon as the new episode comes out. So, okay, how did we get here? I wanted to tell you a little bit of the backstory about how I got to the point where we're going to be, where I started this podcast, and a little bit about my company, Tactical Legal Solutions. So I'm a former prosecutor. I was born and raised in Michigan. I went to law school in Michigan. I graduated during the recession in 2010. Could not get a job. Couldn't do it. Found out about a little place called Hobbs, New Mexico. Figured I'd come out to the DA's office, get a little experience, go back to Michigan. Well, as fate would have it, started moving up the ladder pretty quickly. Met a local girl, got married, and here we are, 10 years later now, still here. I've had a long career as a prosecutor. I rose all the way to the level of chief deputy. I prosecuted drug cases, homicides, DWIs, you name it. I've done it. It was during my time prosecuting the drug cases that I really started to develop a passion for legal issues, because I had to become an expert in search and seizure law. And one of the things that I didn't realize until looking back on it now is how much value I took from providing training to law enforcement. As a DA, that's kind of something you do on the side. Hey, Eric, can you go in there and do a legal update for the local police department? I love doing that. Fast forward, 8 years into being a prosecutor, and I went through something that probably a lot of you can relate to, and that's some burnout. As much as I loved it, as much as I was passionate about it, I had become severely burnt out. So I had to take a step back. And for me, the burnout was getting so severe, it was time for me to go try to do something else. Now, as passionate as I was about being a prosecutor and working with law enforcement, I knew that for my mental health and well-being that I had to go and try something else. So I got a new job, and luckily with that the career move, I was still able to work with law enforcement. But something was missing, and I wasn't ready to go back to the DA's office. So, it took a while, it took some contemplation to think about things. And what I realized was I'm at a point in my life where I could choose. I can go into private practice right now as a criminal defense attorney and make a whole bunch of money. But I don't want to do that because I'm a career prosecutor, and I'm very passionate about law enforcement. I'm very passionate about the rule of law. And I think that's what separates us, from a third world country. And I kind of look at my time as a prosecutor and say, what was the thing that I was the most passionate about? And I always come back to training for law enforcement. I love to do it. I've always gotten great feedback on it. So I decided that I wanted to start a company to provide a better type of legal training for law enforcement officers. I've been to the trainings, I've seen, and there's some really good training, some good companies out there, but by and large, you get a guy that comes in, they get a PowerPoint up there, they talk, they tell war stories, and you leave and you don't really take much out of it. And how often do you really get training from a former prosecutor who actually knows and understands the law? The answer is not very often. So I decided that I wanted to start my company to do what I'm passionate about, which is training law enforcement. But not just training law enforcement. I wanted to provide a better approach to it. I wanted to provide key takeaways, value. I wanted to make sure that the normal everyday patrol guy is taking something from my classes. So I set out on this journey to start the company. Right now, here we are in 2021. It's a side hustle, and it's very small. I run it out of my house here in Hobbs, New Mexico, and I'm just getting started. So that's kind of how we got here today. I've been thinking about doing this podcast for a long time because I thought nobody's doing this. You do see some podcasts on YouTube, but nothing specific like this. So this kind of supplements, what I do as far as my training goes. Is I want to do this podcast to provide value to you, the law enforcement community. And like I said, what can you expect to find on this podcast? So I think there's 3 kind of key things that you're going to take away from this podcast. Number 1, I'm going to talk about training topics on here. Fourth Amendment issues for you guys that are in the United States. It doesn't matter where you're at. United States Supreme Court case law, Fourth Amendment issues, search and seizure. Going to be talking a lot about that because that's very important. And as I always tell everybody when I do my classes, you don't get enough of this in the academy, and you sure as heck don't get enough of it in service. So I want to provide as much as I can based on my background as a prosecutor because it's so important for you, especially in this day and age, and your communities, to make sure that you are not just knowledgeable in search and seizure, but an expert in it. You have to make it your job with a capital J to be an expert in search and seizure law, and there's no getting around it. If you want to be a police officer, you have to do that. So that's number 1. We're going to be talking a lot about search and seizure issues and kind of how it relates to it, civil issues, liability, how that relates to your job. We'll be talking about things that are going on out there, like qualified immunity and where is it headed and what do you need to know about it. So those are some topics that you can expect to see on here. Number 2, like I mentioned, I want to talk about the civil aspect. So we'll discuss Section 1983 lawsuits and what you need to know as a police officer to protect yourself. And not only for that, but what can you do to become a better police officer and enhance your community relationship by understanding the civil aspect. And again, it goes back to understanding the Constitution and search and seizure law. So that's a big topic that we'll talk about there as well. And then finally, I think probably the most important thing with this podcast that I'm going to be talking about on here is I'm going to be doing case analysis. Like I said, a new case comes out for you New Mexico guys. We're a lot different than everywhere else in the country. A new case comes out that may totally change an analysis and it may totally be different than a Fourth Amendment analysis. So when a new case comes out, I'm going to get it, I'm going to read it, I'm going to break it down, and I'm going to do a 10, 15-minute podcast and tell you the important stuff that you need to know about that case. So, again, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can get notified as soon as that episode comes out, because I'm going to try my best to have those episodes out within 48 to 72 hours from when those cases are released. So you can have access to it on your phone, on your laptop, whatever you use to listen to podcasts or watch YouTube, you'll have access to it. So that's kind of the 3 big things that I'm going to try to do with this podcast. I expect it to be a living, breathing thing where it may mold and it may go into some other areas. I don't know. It'll be fun to wait and see what happens there. And, I'd like to bring some guests on here at some point. I don't want it to be all, just boring stuff. I want to try to provide value, but I want it to be exciting. I want it to be entertaining. So, at some point we may bring some guests on, some police officers, some detectives, some attorneys to give you advice. So we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a great benefit for you as a police officer to have this podcast and have access to it. I'm excited. If you can't tell, I'm really passionate about this topic, and I'm excited to see where this goes. So this is the introduction. I'm recording this here at the beginning of 2021. I'm going to be launching the first 3 episodes within a week of this coming out. So chances are, if you're seeing this on YouTube, or you're listening to this and an introduction to tell you what the podcast is about, chances are the episodes are probably out already, because it's going to be within a week of me actually releasing this. So if they're not out yet, stay tuned. They're coming. And if they are out, go listen to them. Here's the other cool thing. I'm not going to be like episode 1, 2, 3. I'm going to just put out, is when something comes up, I'm going to put it out there so you can have access to it. And, if you're an officer in Oregon and I talk about a Ninth Circuit case and that interests you, then listen to that episode. Maybe you don't want to listen to the episode when I talk about the interstitial approach in New Mexico, but I think there's going to be something of value for everybody on here. So that being said, I think I blabbed on enough. Again, I'm really excited about the podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, share this with your fellow officers. I'm not going to lie. I want to be the guy. I want to be your training guy. When you need training, I want you to call me because you listen to me on this podcast, because you're watching my YouTube videos. Use my experience as a former prosecutor. I've been doing it for a long time. That's all I've done is be a prosecutor. And I fought a lot of battles, and I've had to learn inside and out search and seizure law in criminal law. So use that experience, and I'm providing it all for free on here. So follow me, please. Hit the subscribe button. It's going to be a lot of good stuff coming on here. I can't wait to dive into the first 3 episodes and get those out to you guys. So looking forward to working with you. Looking forward to seeing you on the podcast. If you have any questions or anything like that, make sure you go to the comments. Like I said, I'm a small business. Give me a call, send me a text, send me an email, whatever. Just contact me. All right. This is the Tactical In-Service Podcast, and we'll see you guys on episode 1. Thanks.